I wanted to talk to you today about tension, how to sing better by relieving the tension that builds up in your voice. I think for a lot of singers, certainly for me, I wasn't aware what singing should feel like and how effortless it can be. There was so much tension. It was unbelievable how I used to sing when I look back at it now. You know, everything was so forced, so squeezed, so much pressure, so much extra air going through it than was necessary. I mean, all the problems, all the tension that you can possibly create, I've had it. I've either had it all at once or I've had it different problems at different times. It comes and goes. Things sneak back in, as I often say, and I'm going to keep reminding people of this. Your voice is a moving target. It's never the same twice. So do not expect your voice to be the same today as it was yesterday or last week, because you aren't. You're in a different place. You've had a different amount of sleep. You've had a different maybe diet over the last 24 hours. Or anything like that. You might have raised your voice in a situation or needed to make yourself heard in a loud room. Any amount of using your voice like that can change how the muscles kind of start to work when you next go to sing. And tension can just creep in even when you feel like you've got a good grip on it. Now, what amazes me is how singing felt like it felt like it did, and you don't realize how bad that was. And I think a lot of people are in this same boat as me, where what it feels like to sing is actually really intense and it shouldn't be. And there's all sorts of problems with tension going on that are more subtle than you think as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You get tension that you think's okay because you're not realizing it's tension, and when you're looking for tension, it's so subtle you can hardly tell what you're looking for and what you're feeling for. So, as in anything, as I always say to people, learning to sing and learning to use your voice, vocal coaching is kind of all about understanding the sensations and getting better at feeling the sensations that happen inside your body when you sing, and starting to get a better understanding of what to notice, and you could become really, really detailed in the things that you can notice. You start to be able to notice the tiny, subtle things that are happening and differences within those subtle things, and the range within something really subtle that you could barely tell was even going on before. Suddenly you can tell from one end of that spectrum to the other end of it, and you couldn't even notice that before, but now you can tell something on a degree of how intense it is or not for something that you didn't used to be able to spot. So we just have to keep refining our palette of sensations, as someone said once. Tension can creep in a lot of different ways. We get tension from a lack of breath function. It's always going to be first and foremost. It's always going to be the fundamental building block of your voice. You get tension from a lack of proper support, because you start squeezing, pushing, doing all kinds of wrong thing with the breath. So the first thing, go back and watch my video on diaphragmatic breathing. It's a long video talking about everything to do with that. If your support's not right, whereby you push a note out, you force a note out, or you're going squeezing so much air through your chords to try and hit a note, you're going to be creating tension. You're going to be creating compensatory, is that the right word? Tension, where the muscles extrinsically around the larynx are going to start gripping and tensing. There's going to be a lot of intensity in there because you're trying to keep the chords together so that the note comes out and so that you make a sound. When it's pushed and forced and squeezed, all those things going on, the squeeze is slightly different. When it's just airflow getting forced up from the stomach and you're sort of pushing the air out as quickly as you can, or as you raise up the range, you go for a high note and you push for it. You put this extra force in. I mean, so many people do this and so many people feel like that's what they should do. I was one of them. I know this because I was one of them, and I get really almost like rudely blunt about the way I talk about this stuff because it's so hard. You have to really convince people. Again, I keep saying in these videos, you have to really convince people to know what's not healthy and what's not good in how they tend to sing. But a lot of people build up habits. We build up patterns of how we use our body and how we use our instrument when we sing, and we don't realize how wrong some of those things can be, and it takes a lot to undo them. So you feel like you have to force a note out. You feel like hitting a high note takes this extra effort. You feel like the look on people's faces when they sing high note, it means they must be putting so much force into it. The idea that it's that hard and it sounds that impressive, it must need extra this, extra that, extra the other. No, it needs less, 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 less. The chords are moving faster. They're stretched more. That's more. But you need to give less power, give less force, because they can't handle coming together hundreds of times a second when they're stretched to their fullest. When you're forcing air through them, you just got to try and think about that. There's air coming through these chords, blasting through, and they're trying to come together like this. And if you're blasting too much air, then they're just going to either go breathy, or you're going to have to put so much force around them and grip with everything that you've got to keep them together to make that note come out, that you cause strain and injury and you wear your voice down, because they just can't handle that. They just can't handle it. High notes need less. They need less air. They need less force. It's a smaller sound. It's a smaller frequency. It's happening quicker. It moves quicker across the room. You know, it doesn't need big. It needs small and narrow. Yeah. So I'm just doing a light one. So I'm just doing a light one. So I'm just doing a light one. And then something with a bit more strength in it, but it's still not forced. Okay. So tension can come from breathing. It can come from forcing too much air. It can come from squeezing the breath out when you're running out and you sort of start to grip with the wrong muscles, and you cause tension that way. It can be caused by overexerting yourself to try and reach those top notes. It can just be caused by bad habits with parts of the body that are really hard to control because they're all instinct based, like your swallowing muscles and everything attached to that. Your tongue, the root of the tongue down here is a real bugger to get out of the way, and it can find itself pressing down and causing strain on the vocal cords because it's artificially pressing down on things. So all these muscles around here pulling the larynx up all the time need to get out of the way as well. There's a lot of singing technique which is about getting things out of the way. So we can feel for this. We can feel for this muscle under your chin, gripping, doing anything, pulling. We can put our hand on our larynx and feel the Adam's apple, and then go, and we can feel it going up like that. And we can try and stabilize that and keep it down. But anything that you feel, grabbing, pulling, moving things around down here, when you go, especially as you raise up through your range, that's when you're likely to do that. We need to watch out for, and we need to try and stabilize, and we need to try and let go of. Those muscles aren't needed. The A vowel, ooh, is more likely to pull the larynx up slightly, but there's an amount of movement that might happen. There is also a stylistic, degree to which you may want a lower larynx or a higher larynx. These things can creep in stylistically as well, but there's a point where that becomes really destructive to the voice when it's getting pulled up too much. You squeeze the space, you're using muscles, there's a gripping that really wears down on your voice, and we just need to get those muscles out of the way as much as possible and keep constantly aware of what's happening with that. Now, I've experienced so many periods of things creeping back in. I sung for so long, I think, with bad technique that the bad habits can sneak back in when you're not looking, when you're not paying attention, when you think you've got everything sorted out, and you sort of relax a little bit, and before you know it, you're like, what have I been doing for the last couple of weeks that's just started to happen at my gigs that has worn my voice down, and I don't know where it's come from. And you realise that there's something just not letting your voice stay open at the back. There's something like anchoring down on it horribly, and it just creeps back in. It's like, how did that start happening? I didn't notice it. You've got to watch out because things will sneak up on you. So you won't feel what I'm talking about very easily. It's hard to notice the strain and tension that is in your voice, especially if you're used to singing with a lot of gusto and you feel like that's how it feels to sing. If you have to brace yourself for a high note, if you have to really go for it, if you have to set yourself up for this high note and it feels intense, then there's probably something wrong with what you're doing. You've got to start to notice what you can feel, and it's really hard to get there. It's really hard to even begin to break that down. People, I think, expect, and I was like this, I was expecting something much more significant when people talked about the sensations, the vibration, the resonance, when they talked about what's going on with muscles. I was expecting something to be more obvious than it was, but actually all the time I was doing things which were causing strain and tension in my voice, and it felt normal because that's all I'd ever known. So it really is up to you to start feeling things. What happens when you sing? Is the air escaping really quickly as you go through a phrase every time? Is it forced through? I think I had some straws in my pocket today. Have I still got them? I'm not sure if I've still got them. Maybe not. If you've ever come across the straw technique, it's a way to... It's a really good way to sort of get the vocal cords sitting really nicely, but it can also be a way to learn how to control your voice and use less force and less air pressure than what you're used to. So using a straw might be a really good technique to try and start to begin to lose tension, but you may also struggle to even get a note to come out properly because it's all weird and you're not used to doing that kind of thing. I'm going to quickly pause this, grab my straws and be back. Now, I'm doing all my videos in a very relaxed way, almost, well, off the top of my head. I just sat down and started talking, to be honest, today. Maybe I'll do some that are more structured, but on the other hand, I like just being myself, and I don't mind sitting in front of a camera and just chatting. I won't necessarily make every point that I want to make. I might not make it in the clearest way, but I want to just be myself when I do this on YouTube. I'm sat in my little house on my own, and it's nice to have had some comments from people so far, and it's doing a lot better than when I first tried to launch a channel a few years ago. So that's great. Thank you very much for getting involved. Just keep firing away with your questions. It's really, really good. I bought some straws a long time ago, and they were tiny. I thought they were bigger than that, so I kind of used two at once. But if you've never come across the straw technique, and I pitch things on this channel for people who perhaps haven't done a great deal of training or are still trying to suss some things out that may be newer to it. But those of you that have been on a bit more of a journey than that already, hopefully I explain things in a way which clicks, because I've found myself, I've used so many coaches online and so many little bits of lessons and then courses and different things I've done. And sometimes one person says something and it just makes sense all of a sudden, and it just comes across differently, and it helps all the other things you've heard make sense and click into place. You just need to sort of hear it one more time from someone else. And, sometimes things click differently when you listen to different people. But the straw, I think when I first tried to do it, it was just weird. I couldn't do a light enough. I was blasting it and it wasn't working. If you put too much air through that straw, it won't work. It will show you how effortless singing should be, and it can really help get some of that power and excessive force under control, and maybe start to fix the tension that you do have in your voice. But you need to know that it's there in the first place. You might not feel like you have tension, but if you struggle to hit high notes, or if you can't rely on them, or if they feel really, really intense or something difficult, you want to start taking apart what's happening to work out, is that tension? Is that too much strain? Is this too much force? Is that what people are saying? Is this something I've always thought was normal, but actually it's really destructive and really not helpful at all for the voice? You might suddenly have a eureka moment, but the voice is a weird thing where it's so used to working in such a way that sometimes it's hard to get it to work another way, and it takes time. It kind of only wants to operate how you've trained it to operate. So we need to untrain it, retrain it. So if I'm forcing air, I start to just get air and no note. It doesn't feel good either. but if you're pushing, you can tell that you're pushing when you have the resistance of the straw. I know it's weird. Some people will find this stuff completely. What, you want me to sit there with a straw? Yes, I do. So, I've certainly talked about this on some of my other videos. You're trying to, on Instagram, not necessarily on YouTube, I can't remember, but you're trying to let the note out, not force it out. You're trying to set the body up so that it resonates, so that the chords vibrate really nicely, so that the air is just supporting you but not pushing it and not forcing out. The air is just coming out enough to make the note. When I've done exercises like that, well, you can tell when it's pushed compared to when you're just letting the note out. The support is there. There's a bit of engagement, just so you can hear that I'm holding back the chords a little bit. Quite a lot, actually. And then you let go, but not to the point where you let go and it all just collapses. You let go the pressure and make the lightest possible sound you can, the lightest amount of effort, the lightest amount of intensity. Instead of, I often get people to do that at the start of a note when I'm trying to get people to stop the airflow and block the chords, block the airway with the chords. That stops the chords. It stops the air, but you can be a little bit, everything's intense when you set your voice up like that. So that's good because it helps people be able to get the chords engaged and then feel that support, like your whole body's engaged. You know, you can hear that I'm not letting the air through, but what you need to then do is sort of relax enough. Just take the intensity down enough so that you're just using the chords in the lightest possible way. But you're not letting go of your support in your stomach where it just all comes fading out. You're going... Run out of steam. But you see how I'm just letting that note happen? Letting it happen. Your voice is set up. You've told the chords what note you want to hit. You've held the breath back. You're nicely supported. You've relieved any sense of tension, and then you just let that note happen. There's no push. Your body does it for you. If you set the air up, if you set the support up right, say, I'm going to sing that note, and almost let go, it just does it for you. It does it for you. You're not actually doing anything apart from getting the support right and closing the chords up and letting them stretch to the amount that you want. You're setting the voice up for that note and then letting the note out. And when that starts to click, it's so unbelievably different to what you experience if you're used to blowing and forcing and pushing that note out and you feel like you need to reach and give more to get to that high note. They sound impressive, and I have definitely said this before in videos. These high notes sound impressive because our ears are like, wow, that sounds hard. That must be really hard. I couldn't do it. That's hard. That sounds great because it sounds really difficult to do. You just sort of instinctively know that must be a difficult thing. It sounds big as well, and it sounds loud because our ears are tuned to those sorts of frequencies. It helps us hear speech, and it helps us hear danger. It helps us hear someone screaming in pain. It helps us hear a baby wailing. Like, it helps us hear snapped twigs. I don't know. I've heard people say before, anything in that high frequency, high mid frequency, mid range to high mid range. There's a certain peak. I'd have to have a look at it, actually. I can't remember exactly where it is, but I think it's around the sort of presence range where our ears are really attuned to that kind of area. So notes around there sound loud and big anyway. Like, so what you're used to hearing, again, on record, because of the way it's produced as well, like, we've got to watch out what we're actually hearing and be careful not mimic something that we can't reproduce with our own voice without the production quality there. And just that it sounds loud anyway in that kind of range. Just trust and believe that it's a smaller sound than you think, and you have to go less. You really, really, really want to remove tension from your voice. Then this lesson, sometimes people just let things go over their head and they're not realizing what it means. But the sooner you can start to feel the different things that are happening, the quicker you will get somewhere. Try singing with a straw. I really recommend it to understand how powerful, or more importantly, how not powerfully you need to force that note out. You don't need to force it at all. You're letting it out. Suddenly you're realizing that the chords work really easily. The whole system's set up really easily. And you're like, oh, yeah, but I want to sound powerful. Blah, blah, blah. It's, again, really hard to convince people that they sound good when they're singing high. I can't count how many times recently I've had to try and have this conversation with people where they feel like it sounds weak, they feel like it sounds thin, they feel like it sounds soft, they feel like, what, I don't know, just different things where it sounds like a cat, this sounds like this, sounds like that, sounds like the other. People are so obsessed with what they sound like, and they don't really know what they're listening to. And that's the strange thing. But I say, every time I say these things where I'm like going, you this, you that, I'm talking about myself as well. And I'm almost beating myself up for taking so long to get into this stuff and learning properly. Okay. I'm massively an example of one of these kinds of people, which is why I'm allowed to abuse you about it. All right. And I just, what I'm like, listen to what I'm saying. Because I know I needed to, and it took so long to really grasp it. So I'm kind of telling my younger self off in a way. But I've had a girl at the college, I teach at a college, doing a performance the other day with a group, and she just kept backing out of, in the practice run, she just kept backing out of certain notes. And I'm like, just trust your voice, trust and go for it. And she thinks it sounds, I can't remember what she said, but I've had to explain to people so many times that listen to singers in that part of their range. If you can listen to the isolated vocal and actually hear what their voice was actually doing without all the rest of the band and the sound of the music in the background, and without all the production on it necessarily, if you can get a dry take of their vocal and hear what they're actually doing, hear the quality of that sound, it's quite surprising sometimes what they're actually doing. So again, always watch live versions if you're going to follow something. Watch how they do it live and realize how different it is sometimes to how it sounds on record, and how they kind of make things easier for themselves in places, and how you can kind of really hear their voice. You can really hear what they're doing, especially stripped back versions. Someone mentioned this the other day, even better, because there's nothing, to fight against in terms of what your ears can hear. When you've got a very stripped back recording, you can really make sense of what they're doing. And it's surprising when you listen to people. And what you need to listen for is, well, actually listen, actually use your ears, actually work out, okay, there's a brightness to that tone. I think I used Adele recently in an example. And you listen to Adele's voice, if you listen to Adele's voice, it has a brightness. It has a real bright, thin, narrow, small sound to it that is coming through. Something really bright and pharyngeal, perhaps. You hear that brightness, the really, really, really thin part of your voice. See if you can find that within yourself. But when you're listening to other people, you've got to start to be aware of what you're actually listening to. It's really easy to be fooled with what it sounds like compared to what they're actually doing. And people really don't relate their own voice to what other singers are doing when they hear them. They don't really know what to listen for. So it's another thing to refine and understand better. And it helps if you can get a grip on what's going on with the production and things like that as well. All these things will help you have a clearer picture. It's almost a bit of a trick in a way. It sounds incredibly intense and powerful, but I always say the intensity is almost in holding back. What makes it look so intense is the control. So people's faces can look like they're doing something really powerfully, but actually they're trying to control it and place it and get everything set right. And that's what looks intense. It's just getting the control. It's getting everything out of the way and trying to let the voice happen really easily. That's what makes it look intense, which is a strange sort of contradictory thing. So actually this video cut off when I was recording it and I've had to redo the end, which is demoralizing, but I'll carry on. Try the straw. I really think people with a lot of tension and a lot of breath pressure and force might benefit from trying the straw technique. You can't push it through and you might start to realize what you're actually doing. Like, oh my God, I'm actually pushing loads there to try and get that sound out. I'm actually creating way too much airflow and air pressure that I then have to control at this end. And that's asking your voice and your vocal cords to do way too much. It's asking the extrinsic muscles to start getting involved. It's asking things to get involved that we don't want to control it. So, you set your voice, you set your support. Made that more loud and big and rounder, but it's easy. There's no force, there's no push. I'm not running out of air. It's just so effortless. So I want you to try that. I really hope that people gain something from trying to grasp some of the stuff I've said in this video and just refine their sensations. Just be a little bit more investigative in how you listen to yourself, how you feel, what's happening when you sing, and start to just pay attention to it. If the draw of wanting to sound better and feel better on stage or in any situation as a singer is enough, then you will want to do these things. Yes, it's not the most glamorous, fun, expressive, exciting part of being a musician, but my God, trust me, if your voice falls to pieces and you need an operation, there's not a lot that feels much worse than that in my experience. So if you want some help, you can come to me, and I've offered this recently. Send me a video. Send me a quick video of what you're doing in an easy to hear and see room, space, and I'll try and send you quickly some ideas of what you might want to do and what I can see happening to try and help you speed up that process of discovery that you need to go on. But I'm also available for lessons online at singingmatters.co.uk, singingmatters.co.uk over here in the UK. I'll be doing some courses and things like that soon, but for now, one-to-one lessons, and feel free to get a free consultation by sending me a quick video. I've offered that recently. It's a bit of a thank you for anyone who's engaged in this new page, which is, as I say, great to have some people engaging in it. It feels like I'm actually talking to some humans out there in the world, which is great while I sit here alone in my house. So best of luck with it, and I wish you all the best. Try the straw and see whether you can start to see what too much pressure feels like, and you might find that that's what you're always doing. It could be a real changer for you. Good luck.